3 Sinister Janitor Horror Stories revealed. Haunted secrets exposed in forbidden places. The Johnsons thought they had it all. A perfect suburban life, friendly neighbors, annual barbecues. But in their quaint town, whispers of darkness festered beneath the surface. 3 recently vanished children stirred a sinister undercurrent, unsettling the crisp autumn air. Little Emma's laughter echoed through the schoolyard. Until it didn't. She became fixated on Mr. Hayes, the gentle janitor with an unsettling gaze. "He knows something," Emma murmured, her eyes wide with fear, as she clutched her stuffed rabbit, Helen. Days turned into nightmares for Emma, filled with shadows creeping along forgotten halls during recess. The whispers from the dark corners of the playground tickled her ears like icy fingers. "Mum, there are shadows," she'd scream, the trembling in her voice flickering like the autumn leaves. Mrs. Johnson brushed it off. Just a child's imagination, right? But that gnawing feeling tugged at her gut. And then came the missing toys. One by one, they disappeared. Friends at school spoke of ghostly figures stalking the kids in the playground, shadows that darted just out of sight. Panic rose within the neighborhood like a thick fog, wrapping around their hearts as they shared uneasy glances during the weekly block parties. I can't shake the feeling," Mr. Johnson confessed to another dad over half-eaten burgers. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue." That night, the fall festival flickered with excitement, but Emma disappeared as quickly as the daylight faded. Parents banded together, voices rising in frantic searches. "Emma!" they screamed, splitting up, dashing through the school's narrow halls, laughter and music morphing into echoes of dread. Every corner felt heady with the weight of unspoken fears. Darkness against the warm golden lights felt like an omen. Suddenly, they stumbled upon a trapdoor hidden beneath the stage. Its creaking hinges sliced through the air as they swung it open. A sickening chill snaked up their spines. With hearts racing, they descended, driven by terror. They found Mr. Hayes waiting, his intentions cloaked in shadows. "You shouldn't have come down here," he warned, each word a dagger slicing the silence. The air thickened, whispers escalating into a cacophony around them. Horrific memories danced away in the flickering light, shadows forming grotesque shapes. And then, brittle photographs crumpled beneath their trembling hands, children who bore strikingly familiar smiles, their faces long gone but not forgotten. Lost beneath this mundane facade, the tension snapped. The stench of dread filled the air. Something feral lurked in that basement. What would happen to Emma? Mr. Johnson stammered, the question hanging in thick, suffocating silence. That daylight shared memories of a safe, vibrant community. But now, the shadows loomed larger, promising that the horror arrested beneath their feet would not stay buried long. As the echoes of laughter from the schoolyard faded, would they reveal the terrifying secrets held within? Could they escape the creeping dread? Or as the basement door creaked shut, would the past consume them, sealing their fates with the whispers of the lost? The night thickened as reality twisted, forever changed in the grip of haunting memories. Mr. Johnson's voice quaked with a blend of anger and despair. He peered into Mr. Hayes' eyes, searching for answers, but all he found was an empty void. "Where is she?" Panic flared in his chest. Silent shadows shifted around them, each flicker of light revealing grotesque murals painted on the walls, disturbing scenes echoing lost childhoods twisted in torment. The janitor stepped forward, each movement deliberate, exuding an unsettling calm amidst the storm of chaos. "You shouldn't have come here," he repeated, like a mantra, a warning woven with fate. The air thickened with an almost tangible fear, weighing heavy on their chests. Mrs. Johnson squeezed her husband's hand, a silent pact forged in terror. Suddenly, the whispers crescendoed, a jarring discord that burrowed deep into their minds. "Help us," a voice cried, echoing off the cold walls. It was childlike and desperate, piercing through the blankets of darkness. Eyes wide, They scanned the room, hearts racing, searching for the source. Just then, Mrs. Johnson spotted a flickering light in the corner of the basement, not unlike a dance of mischievous spirits. "What is that?" she asked, though she already feared the answer. Mr. Hayes' expression twisted into something unrecognizable. He sighed, and for just a fleeting moment, a trace of humanity flickered there before it was swallowed by shadows. "You cannot help what you do not understand," he murmured. "I was only trying to protect her." As he uttered those words, the flickering light grew brighter. Choking fear filled the basement, yet some unseen force beckoned them, drawing their insatiable curiosity closer. Steeling themselves, they moved toward the light, a hand-in-hand grasp bonding them against the impending horror. It illuminated a set of tattered, colorful drawings strewn across the ground. On closer inspection, the images depicted children joyful, faces morphing into expressions of panic that sent chills crawling down their spines. But just beyond the drawings, the air seemed to warp, revealing a massive, warped mirror crammed in the corner, shrouded in shadows. Something stirred within it, a dark reflection of their distorted fears. As they stepped closer, their own reflections began to morph, twisted into monstrous versions of themselves grinning crazily, as if mocking them. The whispers intensified, now a chorus of laughter echoing from the mirror, intertwining with the tortured cries of children. Mr. Johnson backed away, heart pounding furiously in his chest. "Stay away from it," he shouted, but Mrs. Johnson was already entranced, her eyes locked on the horrific spectacle. "Emma," she whispered, and in that moment, a flicker of movement caught her eye within the frame. A shadow darted behind the glass, small, frantic, and undeniably familiar. "Emma," she screamed, but the words slipped away like sand through their fingers. The basement trembled as the mirror pulsed, its uncanny glow licking out toward them like a hungry flame. Mr. Hayes slumped, eyes glazed over in defeat. "It's not too late," he murmured, almost inaudibly. "But you must choose wisely." The choice loomed ahead, a stark fork splitting their fates. Would they confront the darkness and seek the truth of Emma's disappearance, venturing deeper into the unknown? Or would they retreat, letting complacency shield them from the evil that gripped their town? With the mirror beckoning and shadows swirling menacingly around them, they faced the unimaginable. The answers lay just beyond the reflection, but at what cost? A heavy silence gripped the basement like a noose, and as that silence shattered under the weight of choice, one truth became terrifyingly clear. Some doors once opened cannot be closed. What awaited them through the mirror? Would they emerge with the answers they so desperately sought, or disappear into the madness, lost forever to the whispers of the night? Mrs. Johnson's heart thundered as she fought the pull of the mirror. Emma's shadow flickered once more, a fleeting glimpse that nearly sent her spiraling into insanity. "We need to help her. We can't leave her here." Her voice echoed in the chill of the basement, desperation flooding her every word. Mr. Johnson remained frozen, fear warring with a fierce protector's instinct. But the shadows continued their dance around him, a sinister reminder of decisions made in darkness. "What if it's a trap? What if we lose ourselves, too?" he muttered, panic creeping into his throat. Mr. Hayes, once a fellow companion now reduced to a specter of regret, shook his head slowly, as if claiming that this was the end of his own fight. "Once you step into that world," he trailed off, blinking hard, as if trying to pierce through a fog that was clouding his mind. The whispers crescendoed again, bouncing off the cold stone walls, echoing back the chilling pleas of children. It felt like the walls themselves were alive, closing in steadily, as if eager to consume them. Help us." Against her better judgment, Mrs. Johnson edged closer to the distorted surface of the mirror. Its surface pulsated rhythmically, like a living organism, stretching at the edges as if breathing. Shadows coiled within it, swirling around what resembled a face, wide eyes full of terror. "Emma," she called again. "Don't." Mr. Johnson grabbed her arm, desperation laced with fear. "We have to leave. We can't trust it." But the moment he spoke, the mirror rippled violently, snapping her gaze back. A cacophony of laughter erupted, childish giggles mixed with sinister hisses. It felt like the very floor beneath them moaned in response. Their own reflections splintered into versions twisted by fear and anguish, specters wrapped in malevolence. "Emma," Mrs. Johnson cried out, battling the rising dread that clawed at her throat. Her mind screamed at her to run, but something deeper pushed her forward. And then, a scream of blood-curdling, inhuman shriek that erupted from the mirror, a sound that clawed at her sanity. The laughter faded, transforming into cries of pain, almost like the street lights dimmed in response to its presence. "Choose, Mrs. Johnson," Mr. Hayes' voice returned, now low and ominous. "Your child or your life." The basement felt smaller, the shadows drawing ever closer. "Emma, she's right there," Mrs. Johnson shouted, uncertainty clawing at her heart. "Leave her. It won't end well." Mr. Johnson's grip tightened, pulling her back. But then, something within the mirror shifted. The shapes formed into a small hand reaching out, tiny fingers desperately clawing at the glass as if it were ice. "Mommy, help me." The clarity of the voice threw Mrs. Johnson into pure panic. Tremors shot through her body, swirling emotions tangled with maternal instinct. "No, I want to leave you." In a sudden rush, she lunged for the mirror, hands outstretched, desperate to reach through this abyss. The glass shimmered, sending shockwaves through the air around them. "Dante!" Mr. Johnson screamed, yet time slowed, seconds stretching out like eternal agony. She felt the glass chill against her fingertips, a coldness that transcended reality, threatening to pull her in. A rush of darkness enveloped them, drowning out reason, drowning out everything. And just as it claimed her, the unseen force yanked viciously back, like a bungee cord snapping. The basement erupted in chaos, the air thickening with despair. "Choose wisely," Mr. Hayes murmured again, yet his eyes were now wide with terror as he pointed to the mirror, whose surface beckoned more fiercely than ever. The room fell silent for an agonizing heartbeat, and just then, the mirror shattered, shards scattering like a rain of glass, revealing not only reflections but a twisted reality lurking just beyond. The escape was brutal and fraught with madness, and as the remnants of the mirror fell away, one question hung in the air. What had they unleashed? No longer just a portal, but a curse threatening to break free. Would their escape condemn others? What lay behind Emma's reflection? Would they ever discover the truth hidden in the shadows? The basement groaned in response, darkness reaching out, baring its teeth. Mrs. Johnson staggered back as the shards of the mirror fell to the ground, each piece whispering secrets from the abyss, a symphony of dread echoing in her ear. She felt lightheaded, and a cold sweat trickled down her spine. What happened? What was that? She gasped, eyes darting around the basement. Mr. Johnson held her tighter, his grip like a vice. "We have to go now. There's nothing left for us here." Panic surged in his voice, shaking off remnants of courage. But even as they turned to leave, the darkness swelled, creeping ever closer, hungry for what it had tasted. The basement seemed to close in on them, walls pulsating like a heartbeat. Shadows flickered, not just around them, but intertwining with reality itself, stretching into grotesque shapes that mirrored their fears. "Look!" Mr. Hayes cried, pointing to the floor where the shards glistened. In the fractured glass, images danced, twisted faces, sorrowful eyes, laughter bathed in pain. Those were not just mere reflections. They were souls trapped, reaching through time, demanding to be set free. The basement trembled, and a voice echoed from the depths of the darkness, low and guttural. "You think you can escape?" Each syllable twisted like nails scraping against the stone, sending Mrs. Johnson's heart racing. She turned to her husband. "We can't leave Emma. What do we do?" He shook his head, eyes wild with fear. We can't get involved. It's too late for that." She pointed at the scattered shards, now illuminated with a shimmering light from a source unknown. The closer they ventured, the more their reflections morphed, faces morphing into hollow ghosts of past sorrow. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the air. It came from one of the glimmering shards, a voice familiar yet alien. "Mommy!" It sliced through her heart, pulling her back toward the chaos. What if this is the last chance? What if she's really in there? Mrs. Johnson's voice trembled, worlds colliding within her mind. She couldn't just abandon her child to the void. "Don't be a fool," Mr. Johnson shouted, his feet shifting uneasily. But she could feel the pull, a magnetic grip drawing her closer. The air crackled with energy, and she could almost see Emma peering through, her little face marked with fear and longing. "Help me," The voice echoed again, sweet and desperate. Against all instinct, Mrs. Johnson knelt over the shards, reaching for the most vivid piece, her breath catching in her throat. Please, it were no longer just words. They became a chant, dark and intoxicating, wrapping around her. Suddenly, the shadows twisted in a furious frenzy, exploding into a corporeal form, an entity wreathed in darkness, with an insatiable hunger in its eyes, its presence both suffocating and alluring. Join them, it whispered, a serpent-esque hiss that sent ripples of fear thrumming through her. Forever the room shifted, reality bending and warping like a dream slipping away, and she could feel the darkness surrounding her, ready to consume her soul whole. The weight of her choice pressed down with unforgiving force. The screams of the lost echoed louder, a cacophony demanding to be heard. She wavered, teetering on the edge of despair, torn between her impulse to snatch her child from the void and the looming shadow of that terrible presence. Choose. The voice, not from the mirror, but from within, clawed from the depths of her gut, mixing dread with raw maternal instinct. Each heartbeat screamed for clarity amidst the chaos. There had to be a way, but the darkness surged forward. And just as the edges of her vision began to blur with that endless abyss, a thought flickered like a dying star. What if Emma isn't the only one trapped? Then, the entity lunged, the whisper erupting into a roar, darkness reaching out like hungry hands. Mrs. Johnson gasped as the weight of the moment crashed down around her, her heart racing in tandem with the relentless darkness surrounding them. What other souls might she release? Would the price of one escape lead to her own destruction? The basement quaked, the shadows only sharpening, their claws waiting for her answer. The world around Mrs. Johnson blurred, a painful whirlpool dragging her deeper into darkness. She felt Mr. Johnson's grip slip as he turned to flee, the shadows curling around him, whispering promises only they could hear. Wait, she cried, but her voice was lost, swallowed by the thick, suffocating air. The entity danced before her, its form changing and shifting, no longer merely a shadow but a grotesque caricature of her deepest fears. Join me, it breathed, its voice like cold steel pressing against her skin. You know your daughter is not the only one who needs you. They all cry for you. The shards of glass shimmered enticingly beneath her, their fractured surfaces now alive with movement. Faces pressed against the edges, some familiar, others hauntingly foreign. They reached towards her, begging, their mouths forming silent screams, elongated in desperation. Mrs. Johnson's heart drummed in her chest like a war cry. Emma. Yet beside the fragile visage of her daughter was something darker, a reflection swirling with emotions too complex, too distorted to decipher. The guilt clawed at her mind, tugging insistently like a childish grip, whispering, telling her that maybe, just maybe, it was time to confront the depths of pain she had buried so deep. Please, help us. A chorus of voices called, echoing endlessly in the confines of her mind, melding into a single cry that resonated within her. Each fragment of glass mirrored not just her fears but her regrets, the lost connections with friends and family tossed aside in their pursuit of an ideal life. Each shard beckoned her, the woman she once was, the people she couldn't save. The darkness quivered, sensing her hesitation. It grinned, twisted with malice, as if mocking her struggle. Embrace it, it urged. Learn to let go. Her fingers trembled above the shards, caught in an invisible web of despair. Could she do this? Could she trade new pain for the old? A chilling realization washed over her. It wasn't only Emma buried in the shadows, it was also the girl who didn't stand up for her friend in high school, the sister who had fought over nothing, the mother who had lost track of who she was. Each echo demanded release, a liberation mingled with chaos. Mr. Johnson was still yelling from the darkness, "We have to leave." Desperation lacing his words. But she felt frozen, entranced by the path laid before her. Her choice, with its crushing weight, burrowed deep into her bones. Listen to your husband. The entity hissed, its eyes glowing like fiery coals. Save yourself and leave her be. No. That instinct surged again, more powerful than fear. They need to be freed. With surge of reckless determination, she pushed her trembling hand forward, prepared to reach into the shards, to grasp for hope among the despair. But as she neared, the shadows shifted violently. They wrapped around her wrist like a clamped steel band, clenching tighter, dragging her downward as she fought to maintain her grip. Join them, the entity coiled around her. Mommy, the plea cut through the chaos with a piercing clarity, a lifeline amidst the swirling abyss. In that single word, everything transformed. Not just for Emma, but for the part of her that still dreamed of light. With a desperate lunge, she pressed her fingertips against the most vibrant shard, feeling a heat radiate from it. Each echo surrounding her morphed into one unified surge of sound. Choose us. The basement howled in protest. The shadows writhed, convulsing as if they were alive, angry that she dared to reach for anything at all. As the entity unleashed another haunting scream, her heart thundered in rebellion, freezing time for a heartbeat. What could she risk to save them all? But in that split second, the vision of Emma's frightened eyes burned clear in her mind, and she knew. Every choice retrieves a consequence. The darkness roared, armoring its defenses, shadows fanning out around her as she stood at the precipice of decision. Choose. It commanded again, echoing like the toll of a final bell, with everything within her swirling like a storm. She prepared for the weight of her choice, whether it would enslave them all or liberate them into the void. But even as her heart fought for clarity, a breathless question hung thick in the air. Who would she truly be willing to sacrifice? Another scream resonated. Her resolve wavered as she stared into the abyss. The answer was near. It waited, hungry, ready for her choice. The silence after the Shadow's command felt like a chasm, deep and infinite. Mrs. Johnson's breath quickened, tearing through the heavy air like a desperate plea for mercy. Could she bear the weight of sacrificing a part of herself, a piece of her daughter's innocence, for the sake of those lost in torment? The radiant shard pulsed beneath her fingers, the heat wrapping around her like an embrace, yet the shadows didn't relent. Tendrils of darkness lashed out, clawing at her, pulling her back toward the swirling vortex. Each heartbeat pounded against her ribs, echoing her indecision, the pulse of fear thrumming loud as thunder. Choose. The entity snarled, its breath reeking of decay, mingling with the rancid scent of lost hope. In that moment, her mind whirred with fragmented memories, her daughter's laughter, her sister's tears, friendships rotting away in silence. All those moments were woven into the fabric of her soul, a tapestry fraying at the edges, struggling against disintegration. She closed her eyes, the flickering images blurring into one another, a haunting montage urging her forward. But with every step closer to the shard, every footfall edged between the desperate need to connect and the crippling weight of grief that threatened to swallow her whole. Let go, the shadows whispered. Join us. What would it mean to relinquish control? To surrender to the darkness and offer herself freely, allowing the echoes of her past lives to coalesce around her? The faces in the glass shards cried out, mingling their despair with her own. It wasn't merely about her, she was standing at the precipice of choices for many. She could feel Mr. Johnson's panic, a distant echo of his voice, calling for her in the obscured gloom. Hold on, he shouted, a thin thread of desperation woven through the words. The beam of uncertainty was like a rope fraying at both ends. She took in a shuddering breath, her heart aching for both freedom and connection. But the shadows tightened their grip, urgency igniting their lust for chaos. Stop, she yelled, her voice stronger now, shattering the echoes of despair. You want to take them. In decision's wake, fire ignited within her, fueled by love and seated rage. She slammed her palm against the vibrant shard, the heat igniting a burst of energy that sent ripples through the dark. Light surged, brilliant and blinding, reflecting off the fragmented shards. For a moment, she thought she caught a glimpse of Emma smiling and free, untouched by the darkness. But the entity howled in fury, and the basement quaked as shadows fought against the light. They twisted and churned. An angry sea threatened to engulf her entire being. You can't escape, it screeched, the walls reverberating with its rage. Watch me, she screamed back, determination clawing through her as shards around her glimmered with a new intensity, radiant enough to pierce the pressing darkness. She concentrated, pulling forth every whisper of warmth, every glint of hope from the memories that rushed to the surface. Together, she cried, her fingers flexing around the shard as if to harness the light itself. The shadows recoiled, screeching as the brilliance pushed them back, wavering like an unseen force driving stagnant air out of the room. But victory felt elusive, a dance with danger edging into wild uncertainty. With every scream, her body trembled, straining against the pull of despairing energy sapping her resolve. And yet, just as momentum peaked, the shadows lashed back violently, entwining around her legs, dragging her down. "You think you can resist?" It sneered, malicious delight fueling its power. "Not alone," Mrs. Johnson shouted as she felt warmth envelop her. A soft glow began weaving through the chaos. The glass splintered, the emotions spilling out tears of pain and laughter. The forgotten and the lost danced together. In that moment, she realized they were all intertwined. But the pull of shadows remained strong, vicious claws closing around her throat. What was the cost of her salvation? Was this new light forged of love or born from desperation? As breath caught in her chest, the chilling question gripped her heart. If she tore open the darkness, what would remain to greet her on the other side? And just then, as the darkness converged around her in one final desperate attempt, everything went black. In the depths of her mind echoed the haunting promise, "You will never be free," as she braced for the unknown. What might lie beyond that seductive void? Light pierced through the darkness like a knife, cutting a path into the void. But the light was tinged with a haunting glow that sent shivers racing down Mrs. Johnson's spine. She opened her eyes to find herself suspended in an ethereal space, weightless and disoriented. The shadows had closed in around her, swirling as if alive, hungry for her presence. Her heart thudded in her chest, each beat a frantic reminder that she was still human, still bound by the fears of the living. The distraught cries of the lost echoed in her mind, angry and sorrowful, haunting like a cruel lullaby that would not cease. "Welcome," a voice coiled around her like smoke, seeping into her thoughts. It was both alluring and repulsive. "You've come to join us." Instantly, the scene shifted. Veins of darkness pulsed, and suddenly, spectral images filled the space, faces twisted in agony and despair, their eyes empty, slowly drawing closer, begging for release. "Help us," they murmured, a chorus of despair clinging to her. Their hands reached out, translucent and shaking. The realization crashed over her like icy water. These were the shadows of those who had come before, souls trapped in anguish. Guilt blossomed in her chest, heavy as iron. The promise she made to protect Emma clashed violently against the desperation of the countless lost souls pleading for liberation. "No, I can't," she gasped, the warmth of her resolve flickering against the cold onslaught of ancient sorrow. "Why not? You could be one of us," the shadows coaxed, their voices a cacophony of sweet seduction. "Leave behind your pain. Join us in eternal comfort." The idea wrapped itself around her like a noose, squeezing tighter. She felt the allure of oblivion pulling her, the weight of her own grief pulling her down. Tears streamed down her face, a mix of defiance and fear. "What about my daughter?" she cried, clutching at the radiant shard that felt heavy in her palm, its warm glow her only tether to the world of the living. "What will happen to her if I fall into this darkness?" The shadows bristled, their whispers twisting into anger. "She is already marked, just as you are. You think escaping means she will be spared? No one is safe from the grip of despair." A surge of fury ignited within Mrs. Johnson. They were playing a game with her heart, manipulating her fear and guilt like puppeteers. She cast her eyes around, searching for any sign of light beyond the enveloping darkness. "No, I refuse to let you win," she shouted, voice trembling but resolute. The shard pulsed violently against her grip, and the glow intensified, illuminating the shadowy figures flickering around her, exposing their gaunt faces and hollow eyes. "Enough," she bellowed, throwing her arms wide as if to banish them. "You want to take my soul? Not without a fight." The darkness recoiled momentarily, shrieking in rage. The energy from the shard burst forth like a sun, igniting the shadows, forcing them back. But with every inch the light advanced, whispers grew louder, more frantic, echoing the secrets spoken in hushed tones and the sins committed in darkness. "Do you even know what you've sacrificed to reach this point?" they wailed. "What lies have you buried? What truths are hidden? Tremors of doubt crawled beneath her skin, and as she pushed against the shadows, memories of her past clawed at the edges of her mind, regrets, heartaches, moments of betrayal weaving together into an intricate web of her own failings. She hesitated, doubt gnashing at her determination. The shadows lunged forward in a collective rush, hands grasping and clawing. "Join us. Leave your daughter," they hissed. "Ensure your salvation." Suddenly, an image of Emma flashed before her eyes, innocent and pristine, standing at the edge of a dark abyss, arms outstretched, mouth agape in a silent scream. A chilling realization seized Mrs. Johnson. The price of their fury could be her daughter's safety. They would twist her world, eat away at every joy, leaving only darkness in their wake. With renewed strength, she screamed, "I will save her. I refuse to let any darkness have her." The room trembled as the light exploded, tendrils of hope racing out in all directions, crashing against the shadows. But the darkness wasn't willing to be conquered without a fight. The shadows coiled tighter, their screams reverberating around her. As the light surged, a sickening realization dawned. She was not the only one battling for her soul. Someone else, deep in the shadows, whispered promises of release in her ear. "Embrace the shadows. You can save her if you are willing to pay the price." And within that moment, she saw a flicker of Emma, caught in the midst of the chaos, a fragile light struggling to shine through the dark. "Emma." Mrs. Johnson's voice broke, desperation clawing at her throat. Would she dare dive deeper into the abyss to save her only reason for fighting? Just as her heart threatened to burst, a furious roar shook the void. The shadows screamed, echoing a chilling warning. "You can't save them both." And in a heartbeat, she was caught between two worlds, every heartbeat stronger yet more distant, as the dark laughter swirled around her, reminding her of her choices and the inevitable price of freedom. What would she choose? And with shadows closing in, ready to devour what remained, she braced for the answer. A blast of blinding light enveloped Mrs. Johnson, and she felt herself thrown backward, crashing hard against an unseen wall. The moment her body hit the ground, the dazzling brightness shrank into a flickering glow, leaving only the cold shadows to claw at her skin. Heart racing, she scrambled to her feet, desperate to find Emma amidst the encroaching darkness. Panic clawed at her throat like icy talons. "Emma!" she screamed, voice trembling. Each whisper of the void seemed to laugh at her desperation. For a second, the shadows withdrew, retreating into the corners of her vision, revealing a small clearing. A child's giggle echoed faintly through the dark, a mirage of innocence that chilled her to the bone. Mrs. Johnson's heart skipped. Was it Emma? "Mommy!" The voice cooed, tinkling like wind chimes in a storm. The shadows thickened, twisting and curling like smoke, whispering incessantly to her. "Don't listen. Come to us." They hissed, seducing her with promises of freedom from suffering. But she couldn't let that voice lead her astray again. Gritting her teeth, she pushed deeper into the darkness, focusing her attention on that haunting laugh. "Where are you?" she yelled, dread creeping into her bones as silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Suddenly, a flicker of light appeared. It danced away from her, a captivating glow set against the blackening backdrop. She chased it, heart hammering, willing the precious light to lead her to Emma. The warmth pulsed against her skin, a stark contrast to the chill of the whispers that taunted her. "Do you think she wants you?" A voice echoed, the shadows closing in once more. "She sounds so close, yet so far. You're running out of time." "No," she shouted against the surge of despair. Each step was a battle, but she pressed on, shoving past throngs of anguished faces, their hollow eyes glimmering with vicious delight. "Leave her, save yourself," they urged, clawing at her with phantom fingers. As the light began to flicker, dying against the oppressive gloom, despair filled her. What if she lost Emma forever? Each heartbeat echoed the terror, a final countdown filled with dread, but as she staggered forward, her feet found purchase atop a cold stone slab. The briefest moment of stillness gripped her, and she clawed at the fragment of light, which pulsated with warmth like the distant sun. With both hands clasped around it, she willed more strength from its glow. It responded, igniting wildly, throwing shadows into frenzied retreat. The faces of the lost writhed in agony as the luminescence grew. Stop! You're hurting us. The shadows shrieked, a combination of anguish and rage. Good, Mrs. Johnson shouted, wind filling her lungs. You deserve this pain. Yet as the words left her mouth, an echo of doubt reverberated inside. Was she any different from these lost souls? In that moment, the light revealed a doorway framed by darkness, a threshold adorned with glittering shards pulsing like a beating heart. Beyond it, muffled cries floated, almost drowned by the shadows swirling around her. For a fleeting second, she saw Emma there, illuminated and pure, suspended between hope and despair, tears spilling over her cheeks. Mommy! Emma! Her voice cracked, a desperate plea carving through the abyss. She took a step forward, the air thickening around her. How far are you willing to go? The shadows taunted, swirling around her legs. Their whispers exploded into a cacophony, each voice layering over the next. Old fears revealed, past mistakes laid bare, all urging her to succumb. Embrace the darkness. It will save you, they shouted, but as she tried to shut them out, their words slithered inside her mind, curling around her heart. A cold sweat trickled down her spine. Would she dare sacrifice herself for a chance to save Emma, or would surrender to despair cost her everything? Mommy! The voice was strained now, fragile. A single tear rolled down Mrs. Johnson's cheek as she stood poised at the threshold, light pouring around her like a flood. I'm coming, she screamed, tearing at the brink of insanity. And just as the shadows lunged, eager to snatch her from reality, she leaped into the glowing doorway, the brilliance wrapping around her like a protective shroud. As she braced for impact, a piercing scream erupted from within the shadows. But it wasn't just her own. What had she unleashed in her race against time? Would it be enough to pull them both free from the clutch of such darkness? And as the light enveloped her in a shattering brilliance, she felt an echo, faint, broken, but unmistakably familiar, the echo of her daughter's voice. The world swirled and bent around Mrs. Johnson as she crossed the threshold, her heart pounding like a drum in a funeral march. The brilliant light embraced her, then jettisoned her into an unfamiliar realm, a stark contrast to the terror-laden shadows she had just escaped. She landed on a cold, damp floor, its surface slick with something dark and viscous that stung her bare knees. Mommy! The voice pierced through the haze, sharp as glass. Emma's cry reverberated, echoing through a cavernous space. The sound sent shards of ethereal adrenaline coursing through Mrs. Johnson's veins. Ignoring the sticky sensation that clung to her as she pushed herself to her feet, she called out for her daughter, voice trembling with urgency. Emma, where are you? The darkness here felt alive, swirling and pulsating, as if it were a separate entity, searching for something to devour. The shadows didn't just cling. They lunged with a sinister intent, wrapping around her ankles, trying to pull her back. Her breath hitched, cold air slicing through her lungs. She fought against the tendrils, stumbling forward into the void. With each step, the echoes of laughter morphed into chilling whispers laced with mockery. You'll never find her, she's lost forever, they crooned, a chorus of despair that reverberated off the slippery walls. Their words burrowed deep into her mind, setting her emotions aflame. Shut up, she screamed, desperation fueling her. She staggered forward, vision narrowing to a pinpoint focus on the sound of Emma's cries. The walls began to contort, a living nightmare morphing before her eyes. They were no longer static. They breathed, pulsated, wrapping their ghostly fingers around her will to fight. Then, she saw her, a small figure in the distance, silhouetted against an infuriatingly impenetrable darkness. Emma. Relief washed over her like a wave crashing against a crumbling shore. Hold on, sweetheart. I'm coming. But as she rushed toward her, the very ground beneath her buckled, and she tripped, sprawling onto the floor. The sound of her stumble echoed through the abyss, a cruel reminder of her vulnerability. Mommy Emma's voice was a blend of fear and longing, barely audible against the backdrop of sinister laughter. Emma. Mrs. Johnson cried out again, panic swelling in her chest like a balloon ready to burst. She pushed herself up again and pressed onward, but the air thickened like syrup, weighing her down. The shadows shifted, forming grotesque shapes, distorted fantasies of her fears. They flickered in and out like faulty lights, each flash revealing memories long buried. a haunting reminder of her failures, her regrets. You can't save her. You think she needs you? Look at her, lost in this wretched place. A voice sneered from the dark, slicing through her determination. It was her own guilt, twisted and thrashing, taunting her hopes. No, she roared, her voice cracked and raw. I will not lose her. But as she fought and pushed ahead, she found herself in a broader expanse, lit dimly by a sickly greenish glow. What surrounded her felt wrong, radically unnatural pollution of the mind and soul. Chains hung from the ceiling, clinking ominously like a specter of despair, reminding her that this was not just a fight for Emma's freedom. It was a reckoning with her own demons. And then she stumbled upon a mirror, an oversized relic of her past, tarnished and cracked. Reflexively, she glanced into it, only to recoil in horror. What she saw reflected back was not herself, but a grotesque mockery of her spirit, wretched and hollow, reeking of failure. Emma. Her heart was a drumroll of panic now. She had to find her daughter before the darkness consumed them both. Deep inside, she knew this wasn't just about rescue. It was a battle for her very soul, and the clock was ticking. Mommy. The desperate call pierced her resolve, yet the shadows surged forward, hungry and relentless. Suddenly, the ground shook, and the ceiling trembled, as if the space itself knew they were near. Where was Emma? All around, deceptive whispers spiraled, plotting to ensnare her in self-doubt and despair. Then, urgent footsteps echoed through the space, a singular beam of light struggling to pierce the suffocating darkness. Was it a sign of salvation, or a trap laid by the shadows? All at once, the world spun again, and her heart raced with newfound intensity. What awaited her on the other side? Would she discover Emma, or something far worse? Mrs. Johnson stumbled, darkness swirling around her like a deadly storm. Shadows clawed at her, wrapping tight around her limbs, whispering promises that sent icy shivers down her spine. But through the thick despair, a beacon pulsed, a distant call that echoed like a lifeline. Mommy. That sweet, innocent voice shattered the suffocating gloom. It was a beacon of hope that pierced through the shadows, igniting her soul with purpose. Summoning every ounce of strength, she tore through the fog of self-doubt and fear, pushing forward despite the darkness coiling around her ankles like grasping hands. Hold on, baby. I'm coming, she cried, her voice fierce, cutting through the cacophony of sinister laughter. The world swirled in a torturous ballet of confusion, but she pressed on. Ahead, she saw a glimmering light, flickering in and out of focus, weaving through the inky void that surrounded her. Was it Emma? Was she waiting? Hope surged through her veins, coursing with adrenaline and love, propelling her closer as she neared. The light coalesced into a shimmering silhouette. Emma. The cry tore from her throat, raw with urgency and desperation. With every step, the shadows writhed angrily, their hisses erupting around her. You cannot take her from us. But Mrs. Johnson refused to be intimidated. She gathered her will, envisioning her daughter's sweet face. I want to let you take her, she screamed, pushing against the dark wall of despair. Suddenly, the shadows thickened, morphing into grotesque shapes that twitched and trembled as they advanced. Join us, they chanted, their voices a cacophony of torment, tugging at her heart, trying to lure her into oblivion, into the depths of forgotten souls. No, she shouted, clutching the vibrant shard she had held onto so tightly. It pulsed in her hands, radiating warmth that countered the chill around her. You want to win. I'm not afraid. And at that moment, a cyclone of light burst from her heart, cascading outward in a blinding wave. The darkness recoiled, shuddering back as if scorched by the glow. The moment crystallized, she stood defiantly against the encroaching shadows, drawing from every fiber of her being. The light is stronger than the dark. With a final push, she reached the flickering form of her daughter. Emma stood now, her eyes wide with both recognition and fear, tears streaking her tiny cheeks. Mommy, help me. I'm here. I'm right here. Mrs. Johnson lunged, wrapping her arms around Emma, pulling her close. The warmth between them galvanized the light, creating a shimmering cocoon that imprisoned the darkness. But the shadows screeched in anguish, fighting against her love. You cannot escape. You'll pay for this defiance. The darkness pressed closer, an unending tide of despair and hatred. But in that moment, Mrs. Johnson felt a shift within her, a rush of memories flooding back. Not just pain, but laughter, joy, and the love she had shared with everyone she had ever lost. She gritted her teeth. She could not only draw strength from her love for Emma, but from every connection that had ever mattered. "Step back," she commanded, and the shadows halted, trembling as if they understood the wrath of a mother. Through the swirling chaos, she raised the shard high, letting its light burst forth. "I will save not just us, but everyone trapped in your darkness." And as its radiance pushed against the encroaching shadows, a shockwave reverberated through the air. Faces appeared among the colliding darkness, lost children, anguished figures, eyes widening with disbelief. Emma clung tighter at her side. "I'm so sorry it took me so long." Mrs. Johnson wept, her voice ringing with remorse. "But you all deserve to be free." As she laid her heart bare, the light surged brighter, ready to shatter through the chains binding the lost souls. The darkness recoiled, but it was too late. The bond of love transcended all, flooding through, erasing the stains of despair. "Help us, Mommy," Emma echoed gently, her voice growing stronger, blending with the calls of the lost. "Together," Mrs. Johnson affirmed, raising her shard unwaveringly, and the light exploded outward, blasting through the shadows and into the very essence of their being. The darkness twisted and twisted until it burst apart, a chaotic storm unraveling into a stunning tapestry of freedom. The air filled with joyous cries, enveloping them as the lost souls found their way home, dissipating into a mist of radiant hope. One by one, their faces softened, smiles breaking through the pain. Then, amid the light, Mrs. Johnson felt the grip of darkness relinquish. She sank to her knees, breathless, yet surrounded by warmth. Emma was still there, snug against her, eyes filled with wonder as they floated in the transcendent glow. "Did we save them?" she whispered, awe spilling from her very being. "Yes, we did," Mrs. Johnson replied, overwhelmed with relief, embracing her daughter. "We're going home." As shadows melted into placid light, they stood together, slowly stepping away from the chaotic remnants of despair. Hand in hand, they moved forward into a new dawn, leaving behind haunted whispers and embracing the warmth that awaited them. And they walked on ready for laughter, sunshine, and the life they had almost lost but now had reclaimed. The town still held secrets, but now they would face whatever darkness remained together. United, they knew they could conquer anything. But before this adventure truly ended, a voice echoed softly in the recesses of the quiet. "Remember, love conquers all." You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more fans like you. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this wild conclusion. Don't hold back. And finally, don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this in just as much as you do. Let us keep the story going together.